our dear viewers, and welcome to this edition of our program Africa Today. I'm Rabia. The death tolls from the climate disasters to rise unless Africa weather stations are updated. Scientists are warning that the death tolls from the climate change will rise unless more investment is made in weather monitoring systems in the African continent. More details in the following story.
Scientists are warning that death tolls from climate change will rise unless more investment is made in weather monitoring systems in Africa. Researchers at the University of Cambridge say well-funded hydromet systems must become a priority to help at-risk populations mitigate and adapt to weather-related hazards as the effects of climate change take hold. Dr. Catherine Richards from the Center for the Study of Extensional Risk at the University of Cambridge said the present systems are outdated. She said the climate crisis is increasing the frequency and intensity of floods, droughts, and heat waves, with Africa expected to be among the global regions hit hardest. Yet the systems and technologies across the continent that monitor and forecast weather events and changes to water levels are missing, outmoded, or malfunctioning, leaving African populations even more exposed to climate change. In Europe and the US, there are 636 radar stations for a total population of 1.1 billion and land mass of 20 million square kilometers. In Africa, there are just 37 for a population of 1.2 billion and land mass of 30 million square kilometers. Radar stations detect weather fluctuations and rainfall, as well as long-term climate trends, and are vital for the forewarning of impending floods and other meteorological events. The WMO data shows that more than 50% of the radar stations operating in Africa are unable to produce data accurate enough to predict weather patterns for the coming days or even hours.
Well, our dear viewers, to shed more light on the issue, we are very much delighted to be joined over the phone by Dr. Jailan Sharaf, former Dean of the Faculty of Mass Communication and Technology, Suez Canal University, and the Secretary General of the Climate Ambassadors Initiative. Dr. Sharaf, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you.
Doctor, scientists are warning that the death toll from the climate change will rise unless more investment is made in the weather monitoring systems in the African continent. What's your take on that?
Yes, really I read a report done by researchers from the University of Cambridge. This report was published last August. They stated that the climate crisis is increasing, especially the frequency and intensity of floods, droughts, and heat waves. And this is expected to be in Africa the more hardest, which means that it will hit Africa as a continent more than any continent, other continent. And accordingly, this means that we need to have a radar and to have awareness about this finance, about this equipment, in order to indicate or to show that the official people in the African continent and the African countries, that they should take care of that and take awareness regarding this climate change and to be adapted with what's coming from the weather. That's why one of the researchers, she's called Dr. Catherine Richards, said that the present systems in Africa are outdated, that they are no more working well. So there must be a well-funded for the hydromet system, and this should be at the priority in order to help at-risk population mitigate and adapt to weather. As I told you, this is that Africa is the most continent that is facing this problem in the forecasting.
Yes, indeed. Dr. Sharaf, the entire continent of Africa has just 6% of the number of radar stations as the United States and Europe combined total, despite having a comparable population size and a third more land. How do you see this?
Yes. According to the declaration of the World Meteorological Organization, they mentioned that the entire continent of Africa has just, as you mentioned, 6% of the number of radar stations as if we combine the radar stations in USA and Europe.
Yeah.
Despite having a comparable population size as well as a third more land. For example, in Europe and USA, there are 636 radar stations, while the population are 1.1 billion, and the landmass is about 20 million square kilometers. While in Africa, there are only 37 radar stations for a population 1.2 billion, and for the landmass 30 million kilometers. So these radar stations should the work or these radar stations
Yes.
should detect weather fluctuations and rainfall as well as long-term climate trends, and to give us a warning about that. So
Yes.
that means that in Africa there are only 50% of this radar, which I said that there
Yes.
are 36 stations, radar stations. 50% of them are working well. That means that there are rare of radar stations. Accordingly, there will be no forecasting for what's coming, or no warning for the people to take care of what is coming as earthquake or flood or so and so.
Indeed. Dr. Sharaf, how do you see actually the latest disasters that happened in Morocco, the earthquake and the floods and torrential rain in Libya, which were too hard because of the lack of detection tools? How do you see the repercussions of such crises in both North African states, and how that could be monitored in order to try to reduce the repercussions?
Indeed, what happened in Morocco or in Libya was a disaster. Yes, as you mentioned, that earlier in September, a devastating earthquake struck the regions of High Atlas and Marrakesh, especially in Marrakesh, which is the center of Morocco. It was considered one of the most strongest earthquake that Morocco has ever seen within this century.
Yes.
And there's a loss of thousands of people, and also destruction of countless homes, buildings, and also there are limited in supplies such as food, clean water, shelter, and so. So it's really a tragedy. This is a tragedy, especially that there was no awareness about this earthquake or what happens with that, and they are not ready to face this great or strongest earthquake. After that, a week or 4 days after this earthquake, we also, Libya has faced a disaster struck, which was the Storm Daniel, and what it is a catastrophic flooding, as we see in the newspapers or on the means of mass media or social media, that the coastal city of Derna was particularly hard hit, and quarter of the city submerged due to two dams bursting following heavy rain. And also we have a numbers of casualties and dead people. So this means that we need, as we said, that we need radar stations to warn the people, the official people, the people who are responsible of the weather, of the meteorological, to take care or to give the people warnings that they can evacuate from these disaster areas and move to another areas so that they can protect the lives of their people.
Yes. The World Bank has estimated the $1.5 billion price tag for the continent-wide hydromat systems, but it would save African countries from 13
Yes.
billion dollars in asset losses and 22 billion in livelihood losses annually. What's your take
Yes.
on that, Dr. Sharaf?
Yes, yes. According to that, because we said that there were no station radars available in Africa, and as we mentioned, that only 50% of the 36 radar stations are working, and most of the equipment are outdated. So this decision that the World Bank will offer the African continent with the $1.5 billion, as you mentioned, it will be vital and will be dividend as well, because this means that we are going to save African countries from 13 billion losses in asset losses, as well as also will save 22 billion in livelihood losses annually. This means economically, due to the economics, says that this will be nearly 9-to-1 return on investment is surely a no-brainer. Yani it's out of thinking it's okay, good, and I think we will need more to also as support to the African countries in order to adapt with the climate change.
Indeed. Dr. Jailan Sharaf, former Dean of the Faculty of Mass Comm and Technology, Suez Canal University, and Secretary General of the Climate Ambassadors Initiative. Thank you so much for your precious input. And moving on, the African energy investment needs to double by the year 2030 to meet development and the climate goals. A report has found this swift action to improve the capital access and reduce financing costs are crucial to boosting the clean energy spending in Africa.
To improve capital access and reduced financing costs are crucial to boosting clean energy spending in Africa. Energy investment in the continent needs to more than double by 2030 to meet African development ambitions and climate goals, with nearly two-thirds going to clean energy. The International Energy Agency and the African Development Bank Group said in a report that despite having 20% of the world's population, the region only receives 2% of the global investment in clean energy. The report found a range of real and perceived risks are affecting energy projects in Africa, as well as higher borrowing costs following the COVID-19 pandemic and Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine. The agency and the AFDB said lowering capital costs and supporting investment-worthy projects would require scaling up several instruments, including early-stage financing and the use of tools that can reduce perceived investment risks.
A herd of 2,000 rhino urgently in need of a new owner has finally found one. The rhinos and the farm where they live in South Africa have been purchased by a conservative group that plans to release the animals into the wild over the next decade.
The 2,000 white rhinos living in South Africa's 7,800 hectares platinum rhino farm will progressively be released into protected areas across the continent. NGO African Parks says it has secured emergency funding to buy the farm, which was auctioned last April. Businessman John Hume, who wished to save the species from poaching, opened the farm over a decade ago. Mr. Hume said that over the years he has spent about $150 million on his project to save the world's second largest land mammal. The rewilding project that African Parks will undertake will give the mammals a new future with its challenges, though. The government said 448 of the rare animals were killed across the country last year, only 3 fewer than in 2021, despite increased protection of national parks such as the renowned Kruger. The rhino has and continues to be under threat, especially in South Africa, where poachers hunt them for their horns, which are then sold on the international market. They are highly sought after on black markets where the price per weight rivals that of gold at an estimated $60,000 a kilogram. The country is home to Africa's largest rhino population.
Well, with that, our dear viewers, we come to the end of this edition of our program, Africa Today. Many thanks for watching.